So I want to be respectful of everyone's time. Good evening, welcome back. Happy New Year to everybody. We are kicking off our 2026 speaker series with a three-part series on LGBTQ plus issues. My colleague Jenna Yeager actually attended this Pathways to Power presentation a few months ago and came back and told me how amazing it was. And I thought this is the perfect kickoff to our 2026 series, as well as our three-part on LGBTQ. So I was excited when I reached out to Jax and said, "Hey, Jax, any way you can take this amazing presentation, condense it into 60 minutes, and present it to the league?" And they said, "Give me 90 minutes and we got a deal." So I'm really excited to have Jax here tonight. Just a reminder to keep your microphones muted, to be mindful of your acknowledgement, to remain respectful to our speakers. And I'm going to go ahead and introduce our speaker and we'll get underway. Jax Gonzalez is political director of One Colorado, PhD. Their pronouns are they, them. They lead statewide policy and organizing strategies to advance equity and opportunity for LGBTQ plus Coloradans. They work across communities with elected officials and alongside partner organizations to shape legislation, strengthen civic engagement, and build political power that creates lasting change. And tonight, Jax is going to talk to us about changing the narrative on trans equality. And I can't think of a more timely presentation considering all that is happening and with the loss of gender affirming care this week in Colorado. So I'm going to turn this over to Jax. Jax, thank you for being here. The floor is yours.
Thank you so much, Shauna, for inviting me and Jenna, for suggesting. I'm really happy to be here with y'all tonight and thinking about how we actually build power long term, and how we make sure that Colorado stays a place where everyone uh, continues to have freedom, dignity, and fairness. So for those of you who don't know, who haven't heard me do this a million times, One Colorado is the state's leading advocacy organization dedicated to advancing equality for LGBTQ Coloradans and our families. We advocate across the state. We, of course, engage in the legislative session, but we also attend between 20 and 25 prides every year here in Colorado. And we engage in work during elections to get out the vote, and educate our community on what issues are on the ballot, both for candidates as well as ballot measures. So for today, the goal is for y'all to learn to tell stories that create space for others to change their minds about transgender dignity and equality. Um, we we know that sorry, we're not just here to learn to tell our stories. We're here to learn how to open doors for people. When we share for someone else how we learned to change our minds or learn something new, not just like what we know, we give other people the permission to learn with us and learn as well. And I'm going to be using Marshall Gann's framework, which is the story of self, story of us, story of now, but we're going to adapt it a little bit, where empathy and curiosity are the goals specifically, not specifically getting someone to vote. So it's not about winning arguments with people, right? It's about modeling change. We know, unfortunately, that facts do not change people's minds. Really unfortunate news for someone with a PhD, let me tell you. It took me a while to learn. But connecting with them does. And so that is what I am hopeful for today. I'm going to start first with explaining what's going on in Colorado. What I will say, that Shauna mentioned, is that this week, well, late last week, we learned that both Children's Hospital, Colorado, and Denver Health were going to be pausing gender affirming care medical services for patients under 18. Um, this came as a result of several actions by the federal government, but we expect it to be temporary, and we expect that care to come back. I'm not going to talk about that too much today, but I'm more than happy to send out some resources afterwards for you all to read about a little more about it. So my goal with sharing this isn't deep policy knowledge, but understanding the climate in which our stories will be heard. And before we start sharing those stories, I want y'all to know about three proposed ballot measures that are circulating that would deeply affect transgender youth families and anyone who believes in bodily autonomy. Luckily, the League has already voted on whether or not they support these measures and they oppose them. They're all collecting signatures right now. So many of you, I'm sure, are aware of these ballot measures, but just want to make sure everybody is. So these measures are being promoted under the banner of Protect Kids Colorado, but their real goal is to divide our communities by spreading fear and misinformation. And they're using very emotionally charged information and emotionally charged language, sorry, to make voters feel like they have to protect children. But the reality is that these ballot measures target transgender youth, families, and medical professionals. So, what is a ballot initiative? Again, maybe not something that you all need, but just to make sure, in Colorado, anyone can propose a change to state law by filing a ballot initiative, but it must go through a multi-step process. It goes through the title process at the title board. They have to collect around 120,000 plus signatures. They must submit those signatures to the Secretary of State, and then it can get placed on the ballot. Um, The title board is a three-member panel that reviews every initiative to make sure that it meets legal standards, which are pretty narrow, but also somehow varied as to whether it addresses one issue. It has to be a single subject, and it has to be fair and clear to voters. What does fair and clear mean? Great. Those are subjective words, unfortunately. And the law doesn't always handle them the same. So once approved, they have to collect signatures, and that's where we're at in this process. So there's three ballot measures collecting signatures right now. I'm going to go over them briefly, and then we'll jump into the fun part, which is actually talking about storytelling. So this one is often called the sports ban. It's Initiative 109. It would require all Colorado schools and colleges to divide sports strictly by biological sex, banning transgender girls and women from playing with their peers. It also impacts transgender boys, but they are targeting trans girls with this explicit ballot measure. Supporters, the proponents, are framing it as protecting girls in sports. And it's language that's obviously designed to sound really caring, right? You hear that and you think, yeah, I'm with that. But it's being used to exclude and shame. And what it really does is it forces schools to police gender, which harms all kids, and by teaching them that their bodies should be judged and sorted instead of celebrated. So our stories can show how like that fairness and inclusion are not opposites, and they're both essential to what makes teams and communities strong, right? Sports are about connection and belonging in K through 12 settings. And when kids are left out from those sports, they suffer. So there's Initiative 110. This is often called the surgery ban, which would make it illegal for healthcare providers to often some medical procedures to transgender youth under 18, even with family consent and medical supervision. It also blocks insurance coverage for state funding for those procedures, including Medicaid. In Colorado, those procedures, gender affirming care is covered under our insurance mandate. The reality is that these surgeries are very rare, exceedingly rare. We're not going to talk about any exact numbers tonight, but I can tell you it's about less than 10 every year. And every decision is made extremely carefully between families and young people and their doctors. But this initiative spreads this false idea that care is being rushed or forced. There are there are no, and by zero I mean zero forms of what is colloquially called bottom surgery or genital surgeries done on minors in Colorado. It has never been done in Colorado. We do not have a pediatric surgeon that focuses on that area. Those surgeries are not done until the child has progress through puberty, because otherwise the outcomes of the surgeries are not as successful. Whereas the less than 10 surgeries happening each year are usually top surgeries, so breast reductions specifically. And so our stories can help people connect the actual dots here, that families know what's best for their children and that love and care, not politics, should guide those decisions. There's a third one that you won't see One Colorado speak about in our communications or in the public broadly, but for these trainings, I am talking about it, which is the Children Are Not for Sale Act. I'm also calling it the Trafficking Initiative, and it sounds like something everyone agree with, and that is the exact point. So on the surface, it's about increasing penalties for child trafficking, but the language is so vague that it could be used to criminalize families or providers who help minors access gender affirming care or abortion services. It also introduces mandatory life without parole sentences, sorry, which removes any discretion, and it also harms survivors. Explicitly, many survivors end up getting charged with trafficking because they end up getting involved in the process of being trafficked. And so this initiative is their Trojan horse. It builds emotional appeal to protect children and to make the other harmful measures sound more legitimate. So if you were to see them on the streets collecting signatures, they will start talking about this initiative first and then go through the rest of them. So they hook you in with this, and that's how they're confusing people. So our stories can reclaim that same instinct, the desire to protect kids, and show that real protection actually means helping young people grow up in safe and supportive environments, being loved for who they actually are. So when Colorado did some polling to understand, to inform, and shape our campaign strategies so we can be as effective and impactful as possible. So we have these four values of freedom, privacy, safety, and trust that are going to help move people with us. So an example for freedom is that families should have the freedom to make their own medical decisions. For privacy, politicians don't belong in the exam room. For safety, we need to protect kids from harm, right? And forced inspections to determine the child's gender or sex is not going to help anyone. So forced inspections put children at risk and violate their privacy. And then trust. We trust parents and doctors, not politicians, to care for kids. And so these are our like top tips for transforming the narrative around trans identity, around trans equality, around trans existence, which is to lead with values, not details. As I said before, I'm not going to spend a lot of time talking about how few surgeries happen because it actually doesn't change people's minds. But if you begin conversations with a shared value like freedom, family, and safety, rather than medical procedures or technology, we lead people with us. We bring them along with us. We show them um, that we want the same things for children and that we have the same values. We want to stay focused on solutions whenever possible. So emphasize that communities thrive when families, not politicians, make personal health decisions. You might say, wow, Jax, that sounds so familiar to the talking points on bodily autonomy and abortion rights and access. It's because it is very similar. However, the difference is many people don't realize that they know someone who's transgender and who is transitioned. And so it is harder to get people to relate on the issue of transition-related care. And so that is why we want to help people see that this is a broader story about attacks on our healthcare and attacks on individual privacy versus attacks on individual trans people. We want to avoid repeating myths very often, right? Someone will say, well, I heard that 2,000 children got surgery in Colorado or genital mutilation, whatever they say, right? When we respond to those types of statements, we don't want to reinstate the information. Instead, you want to we say to respond with like affirm what the value or feeling is that they're having. I hear that you're really worried about kids getting harmed. The good news is, I trust that doctors and families know what's best for children. I don't actually think that politicians know better than doctors, right? So instead of saying there aren't thousands of children getting top surgery, but responding with like, I hear you. I hear that that's a concern of yours. And then for last but not least, we really want to reinforce solidarity. So issues of health and family and bodily autonomy connect across communities. Support for one group's freedom strengthens everyone's. We can see it's not that hard to see how the Trump administration and has come after families of immigrants and immigrants themselves, of course, um, and how they're now turning that tactic onto trans communities. This is the same tactic to dehumanize a group of people that is small enough to control. Um, and it is really important to me as a trans activist, as a white person who shows up in many white spaces to help other trans and queer people and people who care about LGBTQ issues to understand that these issues are intertwined. This hatred of another person is so intertwined with the way that we experience harm and oppression in our community. And so as One Colorado is moving forward in 2026 to hopefully defeat these anti-trans ballot measures, um, we we know that we can't do that without having real material solidarity with other movements that are also having to fight this dehumanization. So these measures all have one thing in common. They use fear, emotions. And people might hear about them at church, at the gym, or from a neighbor, often not from the news. And that is why stories matter so much. So facts alone, like I said, won't reach someone who's scared or uncertain, but those stories can. And specifically, when we show someone that we were willing to learn and change our perspective, those moments that make us more compassionate or more relatable, we help others feel that it's okay to change their mind too. And so that's what we're going to practice today. So I'm going to start with a short video that is Nadia and her father talking about their family. This is a great example of what what this kind of language looks like in practice. So I'm going to share it. It's not a conversation between two people trying to convince each other. It's just a short commercial style story, 30-second story. But I wanted to share it because I think it's really useful and I get a lot of great feedback on it. So we'll start here and then we'll work through all the steps.
71% of Americans say that they've never met a trans person. Here I am. I'm a student studying performing arts and fashion design. I love everything about art and creating things. I'm also trans.
When Nadia came out in her transition, I was very unfamiliar with the whole process. I knew that for me to keep her in my life, I needed to be able to change. I needed to be able to learn. There's a lot of hate and there's a lot of people out there that just want families like ours to fail.
What's at stake right now are people's lives. I want to be happy. I want to be healthy. I want to have people by my side that will always be there for me.
I'm just so proud of who she is, who she's going to become.
I love you. We all have the right to be ourselves without fear. Help us share our story.
I want to take a moment to reflect on that video. What, if anybody wants to put into the chat or speak into the space, what emotions come up for you while you're watching that? I'll say it gives me the chills every time. But if anybody wants to offer what comes up for them when they watch that.
Jax, I would say it gives me a strange sense of hope almost, seeing this amazing family rallying around their daughter. And it makes me hope that, I think that the majority of people look at videos like this and think, yeah, let's support that. That's amazing, and I think we need to see more of it.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. Hope. Anyone else?
Well, love,
Yeah.
just the love between father and daughter, and um, recognizing that change needed to happen for the relationship to continue.
Yeah. Absolutely. Absolutely.
We have
Um,
a comment in the chat. It's not clear to me what the video was about.
that is interesting. Um, so the video itself was created to be a political ad. Um, uh, and by political ad, I mean a culture shifting ad. So an ad that you would put into the media in a place that has an anti-trans ballot measure moving in order to build that empathy. And so that is what the ad is about explicitly. It's just about Nadia. It's explicitly the intent of these is this series, which is called Here I Am, the Here I Am series. Here we are, sorry, series is to ensure that trans people just being themselves are visible, and those stories are visible. And so I wanted to share that video explicitly because I think it's a really good example, like you said, Shauna, of hope. To show how her father shared that story of, I didn't understand. I didn't know what that meant. I had to go learn more. And now I understand. What I understood is that I love my daughter and that it was really important for me to figure out how to support her. Right. I've shown this video to countless parent groups. And one time I had someone speak up who lives in the Salida area, or Alamosa, sorry, not Salida, in Alamosa. And he was tearing up and he said, I I felt that way when my child first came out. And I am I have been afraid that I messed up when they first came out. And to see that it's possible to move past that and that you don't have to be perfect and that you can learn and change is really powerful. And
Yeah. And we have some more comments. It was beautiful to see the support and love from her father. I loved her father's acknowledgement that he needed to be open and learn, and that it appears to be normal living now, not an abnormal situation. And yeah,
yeah, yeah,
sorry, I didn't mean to
absolutely.
interrupt you.
No, that's great. Thank you. Yeah. It's really just intended to be something that shows kind of what a general family, to encapsulate that we are just people, essentially. There's a lot of other stories. This is the one that I like to use for this example. But the other thing that's really important about this narrative framework and using this storytelling is that we want to connect. Stories help people connect values to action, and they help us face fear with hope. When very often, many people who work in LGBTQ services or advocacy, generally, their initial thought when someone says, when an anti-trans bill is being run or an anti-sex ed bill is being run or anti LGBTQ bill broadly, right, is to give testimony on how often what the rate of suicidality is for LGBTQ youth. That is very often the initial thought. Oh, well, obviously, we need to tell people that this statistically is going to harm kids. But while that might convince a politician, what it doesn't do is make people want to be with us, right? Because it gets turned on its head. And you might have heard this, right? Where people will then say, oh, well, clearly there's something wrong with being LGBTQ if they all are experiencing this level of suicidality. And I could, of course, go into an explanation of no, it's because of society that it's hard to be a queer person. It's not inherently hard to be queer, right? Just like it's because of society that it's hard to be a woman. It's not inherently hard to be a woman. There's rules that we have been taught to follow that make it hard, right? The feminine mystique, for example, in Betty Friedan's opening up so many women's eyes to that book to say, like, you aren't alone. Other people feel this way, and it's not some failure of your part as a woman to feel this way. And so um, we want to bring people with us. We want to show them hope. We want to show them that being with us is good and fun, and we want to help people believe. Yeah, Kathy.
Yeah, I think also it counteracts there's there seems to be an underlying current among especially among um church groups that trans people are dangerous. Um and I think that's something that a video of a normal loving family, you know, we have to sort of counteract that you're just people. You're not sexual perverts. You are just people, and trans kids are just kids. Um, so I think there's a lot of undercurrent of fear and danger in trans people.
Mhm. Absolutely. And this has been used for a long time against any movement, against every social justice movement that has ever occurred. At least I'm more of an expert in this in the US, but I also know internationally, this is also a tactic, right? To create a scary other that we shouldn't trust around our children. Gets used again and again, right? It got used during the civil rights movement, and in the enslavement of Black people in this country. It got used during the feminist movement, right? The oh my gosh. I used to give so many lectures on this, and now it's gone out of my head. Uh, there's a diagnosis for when a woman was crazy.
Hysteria.
Thank you. Jeez Louise. That was rough. Can't believe I couldn't remember that. Right? A diagnosis of hysteria. And really, if you look at the diagnostic requirements, it was like if a woman was outspoken, like this gets used. And so that's why we're using this approach, which is a framework from Marshall Ganj, which I mentioned before. And he helped train organizers in the civil rights movement and later several other movements, which is why we still use it today. Every one of us has experience and has lived through something that tested our values. And when we tell those stories, we're not just explaining what we believe, but we're showing how we learned to believe it. And so the storytelling framework is the story of self. So begin with your personal connection. It's not about perfection, it's about humanity. What challenged what you believed and how did you grow? Then there's the story of us. Turns your learning into something collective. It shows that the values guiding you, fairness, love, care, are the same values guiding your community. And then the story of now makes it real. So we want to invite people to act or reflect, not through guilt or fear, but through hope and courage, right? We do not want to make people afraid of being wrong, right? We want to give them the opportunity to change their mind. Um, That's how change happens when someone feels, oh, that could be my story too. So I would love if you all could think about a moment in your life when you changed your mind about something meaningful, maybe about a person, a belief, or even a fear. We're going to take a moment. I'm going to have you just jot down a few notes. If you're someone who needs to write things down like me when you're thinking, um, you're not going to end up sharing this out with the team here, but I would love for you to reflect on this. So just take a minute to reflect quietly, um, and think about a time when you changed your mind about something important. Okay. So with that time in your mind when you change your mind, but thinking about that, um, think about what allowed that change to happen. Was it a factor of statistic? Often it's not, because most of us change our minds when when someone we trusted shared a story, or because we saw a situation differently through a relationship or an experience. And so that same process that changed you is what can help you change others. So we're going to work through some prompts together, everybody. This is the exciting part. Um, 1 second. Okay. So I'm going to put this in the chat. This is a document that you should be able to view if you click on it. And you should be able to make a copy of it or use it to take notes for yourself. But I wanted you all to have the prompts as we work through them. So I want you to imagine you're walking with a friend. Maybe I didn't ask where you all live. I'm sure you're all over the state. Maybe through a park. And you see a petition table for ballot initiative 109, which was the sports ban. I want you to think about your friend says, I'm going to sign this. I hear it protects girls in sports. And I want you to think about how you would respond today. What would be some of your initial response, not initiative, geez Louise, initial response. Oh, I didn't ask you to reflect on that. That's right. What would be your initial response? And then just jot that down. I would ask questions about the petition. Nice, Deborah. Yeah. You can put it in the chat. Take little notes for yourself, but how would you respond? You don't need to respond with the perfect narrative here, but how would you respond? Basing their support on. Yeah, so Shauna says, I would ask about what they're basing their support on. Deborah says, I'd ask questions about the petition. So honestly, I'd tell them nicely why I disagree. Yeah, Beth, absolutely. That's also an option. And so based on where you were and what you believed 10, 20 years ago, how would you have responded to your friend then? Do you think your response would have been different? Do you think that you've learned something in the last 20 years that changed how you might have responded? Hmm. Mm, mm. Okay, some of you are still answering prompt 1, which I want to name because they're awesome. Megan said I'd ask them to consider who's trying to get that passed. I love that question. I once asked a QAnon conspiracy theorist who benefits from believing that the Clintons were trafficking children, and that was a fun conversation. Because she had never thought about who might benefit from that. Monica said, I'd say I've been the girl that played sports. I think a lot of good things about it, and some things made it hard, like people assuming girls shouldn't play sports. Absolutely, Monica. Kathy said, I know you want to protect kids, but I felt excluded from Little League when I was young. I think strict segregation in sports harmed me. Absolutely. Relate it back to yourself. So thinking about how you've grown in the last 10 to 20 years. Sorry, I thought I just heard someone in the office and there's no one here. Um, do you think that you would have responded differently 10 years ago? I can tell you that I would have not been so nice 10 years ago. That's for sure. But I also know that many people maybe wouldn't have known, right? An initiative related to protecting girls in sports. I'm a feminist. I want girls to play sports, right? It might not have been as clear. And so that's what we're looking for in what this kind of story we tell, like you all have already given great examples of. So we want to think through your story of self. Every transformative story starts with a moment of change. So, like a challenge, a choice, an outcome. Use an example, a time you learned something that challenged what you thought or knew. It could be explicitly about this right now, but you could also just choose other things. Like, I really thought that's silly. That was a silly example. I was gonna talk about how I used to think that avocados were really gross. But that doesn't make sense here, actually. But it could be, I used to really think that sports were boring. Or I used to really believe that people who watch sports didn't have the same values as me. Um, and then I met my partner who um who played sports their entire childhood and into adulthood. And it was an incredibly important place for them to be able to connect with other people. It's where they made all their friends. They still know many people that they played frisbee with in college and high school. It's it's how they built relationships and learned how to relate to other people. Um, so something like that. What challenged what you believed? What choice did you make in that moment? What was the outcome and what did you learn? What value guided your choice? So, as vulnerable as you're willing to be, right? It might change depending on who you're talking to. Maybe that friend you were walking with, you know really well, and you believe that that person would typically be with you on this issue of trans inclusive policies and not allowing anti-trans measures uh, to get on the ballot. And you believe that that person is with you. Maybe your response is really vulnerable. It's like, hey, I have a trans kid, or hey, my niece is trans, or I've had thoughts about gender, right, myself. But it also could be that this is a neighbor, and maybe those are not things like a neighbor down the street, right, that you just met. Though those are not things you want to share. You can decrease the level of vulnerability depending on your safety and risk and who this person is. But the more honest and vulnerable you are willing to be, even with an awareness of risk, um, it really helps. It helps people connect. Um, so building a story of us. So who is your us? Um, sorry, I'm gonna pause and say on this worksheet that I gave you all, it has these reflection questions starting on page 2. You can add you can take some notes for yourself on this at the end after I go through these different steps. If we had longer, I would have us break out and talk through them and then come back and, the whole thing, but I'm not going to have us do that because I don't want to go over time. But while I go through these, think through how you would answer them. At the end, once I get through them, I'm going to give you all about 4 minutes on your own to think through how you might write or how you might respond to this question um, that you have experienced walking with your friend using this structure. So this discover your story of self is the first part in this process, and is in that worksheet. Then the story of us. Story of us connects your personal journey to the values you share with community. We all want to protect kids, be fair, and help each other out. Our stories should start there. And so, who is your us? Maybe it's your family, it's a faith group, a neighborhood, a workplace. What values do you share? Fairness, family, kindness are all pretty typical values, but make it real. Make it really about that. And relating to the statement I made about my partner, um, for them to feel belonging and connection is really important to me. And because I care a lot about their safety. And we know that people live longer, healthier lives when they feel safe. Um, and you want to think through what kind of shared moments or experiences would reflect those values, and how does your story connect to those shared values? So, for example, one example might be that in our church, we've always believed that every child is a child of God. That's what I remember when my neighbor's kid came out as trans, right? So, bringing it from the story of self to the story of us is here's who I am, and here's what that means to me in community. And then inviting people into the story. So the story of now, it's an invitation, not a debate. So it helps people imagine a hopeful future and take one small step towards it. So thinking about what fear or misinformation is dividing people right now is a good prompt. And what's at stake if we stay silent? What our community could look like if we chose empathy instead? And what is one small action you can invite others to take? And so an example isn't this now isn't a policy pitch, it's a call to reflection and courage. An example might be right now. So right now, people are being told to fear trans kids. And I've seen how compassion keeps our community strong. And I'm asking you to start with listening. Right? So taking us from this place of like, here's how I changed my mind, here's why it relates to our values as a community, and here's how it relates to this specific thing that we are talking about for trans kids. Because when people hear fear-based claims, your story can remind them who they really are, right? So they are hearing that trans children, trans adults are dangerous. And we say, but I've seen how compassion is actually really powerful for my community. And I just hope that you can listen um, uh, to understand a little bit more about this community. So now I'm going to give you all 5 minutes. I'm going to put a little timer on the screen, like when I was an elementary school teacher, um, for you all to work through combine your story. So this is the full thing, self, us, and now. Where did you, and we are going to, sorry, I'm going to ask whoever wants to share it to share afterwards. So please feel free, to, be ready to do that. And so I'm going to go, sorry, back to, there we go. I'm gonna have this up on the screen. So why I care and how I learned, story of us, what we share as a community, story of now, the urgent call to act with empathy and courage. So this is the full framework. So I'm gonna give you all 5 minutes to work on that on your own. Think about it, jot down some notes, come up with some points that you think will work for you. And then we will come back and share together. Whoever wants to, you don't have to. I'm also gonna do it. So that you aren't all alone. Did you know Google did this? I just learned this recently. Okay, I'll be right back. All right, everybody. I'm gonna have us come back together. I went and got myself a popsicle. 'Cause that's what I needed today. Um, okay. Anybody want to hop in and share their story? Um, thinking through um this this moment. Shauna, I see you came off mute.
I did, and I will go ahead and share. And I don't know if this is right or not, but I'm gonna throw it out there and see what you think.
You so do not have to be right.
Okay, good.
We're learning.
I organized the league's first presence at Pride this year, this past summer. We did a booth at Pride, and I feel like a person who's very comfortable with the LGBTQ community. I have a lot of friends and family in that community. But what I found, what I learned is that there were segments of the LGBTQ community that I was not familiar with, and that perhaps even um, pushed my comfort zone or my knowledge. And I felt like I had to open myself up a little bit more. And then I would go home at the end of the day and talk to my family. And I had to have the conversations with them and kind of try to explain who I had met and what I had learned. But what I came away with more than anything at the end of Pride weekend is that these are kind people, they are funny people, they are vulnerable people, they are people who want connection. They are all struggling and just taking it one day at a time like the rest of us. And it gave me so much. It was just, I left that weekend like, wow, I thought I knew and I had no idea. And my mind was even opened up and I left feeling really good and maybe even a little bit proud of myself for seeing these people and opening my heart and my mind to them and realizing they're no different than me. They struggle every day just like I do and they have joy just like I do. So that's mine. And I don't know if that was what you were looking for, but I threw it out there.
Absolutely, Shauna. I think that was really, thank you for sharing. That was absolutely vulnerable to be honest about in a space with other people. And I also just really respect that you were like naming like, oh, I learned something in this space. Like I would say that I believe that I am, and you didn't say ally, but I am with people on this. And there was parts of the community that I didn't know existed and pushed my own boundary on what I felt was acceptable, for example. That's not a term you use, that's what I used. I think it's a really great way to open up a conversation with someone who maybe is a little bit more skeptical generally about the LGBTQ community, right? To say like, I didn't know this either. And like I still walked away. I'm still walking away from this realization and understanding that LGBTQ people have the same needs as everybody else, right? Awesome. Thank you, Shauna. And thank you for being brave and going first. Would anybody else like to jump in?
I'm the only one.
Go ahead, Megan.
So mine's not quite as big, but it's a long time ago. So I come from a part of Mexico that's very red and conservative. And I was right in the middle. And I was in law school, and it was the time of Thomas Clarence and the confirmations. I didn't like him, I didn't want him. But some of the more liberal students were like, oh, we really, this is terrible. There's a lot of reasons now why I realize how terrible that was. But beside that point, and I said, well, would it be so bad to have a conservative court? And this guy I was walking with didn't miss a beat. His name was Carlos. And he said, well, I'd rather have a Supreme Court that gave me more rights rather than less. And I was like, never thought of it that way. Totally, had nothing I could say back. He was totally right. And I was like, wow. So to me, that was a big turning point just in looking at it a completely different way, that somebody else shared their experience and they were right.
What a cool experience to have in law school.
In law school. Yeah. Just to have
Yeah.
somebody, I was like, wow, never thought of that way. You win. You're right. I'm on your side now.
Unfortunately, we did in fact get a very conservative court eventually. But
They were
um
playing the long game on that one. Dang.
yeah, yeah, dang. But yeah, exactly that to say, like, I thought this was fine, but this other person shared this one sentence with me and it changed my mind.
Totally.
Yeah. Awesome. Thank you. Thank you for sharing, Megan. Anybody else would jump in?
I can go if you'd like.
I will share.
Okay. Go ahead, Audrey, and then
Yeah, I'm presently, I've been for the last 3 years actually co-chair of the diversity committee with American Association of University Women, AUW. But initially, the transgender situation was not, in my head particularly at that time, or our head particularly at that time. I think one of the things that I witnessed that struck me, I don't know whether you remember this, but it was a political thing. One of the congresswomen had celebrated that her daughter was coming out, and she was vilified, and so was her daughter by other congresspeople. So that's something that really, touched me as being, well, it just touched me deeply as, it was just out there, in the media as something that was totally dehumanizing.
mm,
So, as a result of that, and what lately has been in the political climate where the transgender are just suffering so many loss of rights and acknowledgement, that it has spurred me on now to focus on transgender youth and what is happening with the result of all of these edicts that are coming down to prevent them from, being able to live a life that they should be living, an authentic life. So that's a little bit of my story.
awesome, Audrey. Thank you so much
Oh,
for
let me add to that too,
yeah,
because
yeah.
but we, as a result too, my part of my committee now is we have been attending board meetings here in Colorado Springs as a result of all of these things and stand in support of the Inside Out Youth Services.
Oh, gosh, I love Inside Out. They really are
Yeah.
doing really cool work, and anybody who's doing work in Colorado Springs, I applaud in this arena for sure. I really what I really like about what I think is really powerful about what you shared, um, Audrey, is that the moment that changed your mind was like how vilified this mother and daughter were by this moment. Um, just for coming out. And how I imagine, or I wonder, is that about like, was the experience like, this is unfair to be happening to this person just because of who, what their identity is or what their child's identity is, right? And fairness is absolutely a value that people will connect on to say like it's unfair to villainize people just for having an identity, right? To keep people from being able to access spaces just because of that identity or sports. Yeah, I really appreciate that, Audrey. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you.
I heard someone else come off mute too. Who was that?
That was me.
Oh, hey, Micah, go ahead.
Hey. Okay. So I'm not sure if I was supposed to do this specifically about the ballot initiatives, but hi everyone, I'm Micah Ramirez. I'm the Colorado field organizer with One Colorado. So I've seen this a bunch before, and I was really thinking about how to apply this to some of the things that are going on in my life. So I was thinking a lot about in 2016 when I was kind of just getting started as a little baby activist, and there was such a big debate about cancel culture. And I originally was on the side of like, yeah, we should cancel people if they do something wrong. Um, I really like value accountability. But then I started like getting more and more involved, and I was realizing how afraid I was to make a mistake that it became kind of paralyzing. And so that experience kind of helped me um, realize that, like, yes, I value accountability, but it needs to lead to growth. Um, so now I'm thinking about things that are going on in our community while we are all facing like these really scary things coming our way, and we're having a lot of infighting and stuff. And so, um, just thinking about how I know everyone that's doing activism right now really values growth and liberation. Um, and so I think that we really need to start approaching community with a restorative justice framework instead of just like carceral logic, giving each other grace and empathy, and like remembering that there was a point where I didn't know all these things too. So just giving people grace and empathy.
Thank you, Micah. That's a really awesome example. I'm really glad you brought it up. Um, it's it's also something that I experience, too, in my own growth, as a community organizer. So thank you. Peggy, go ahead.
Yeah, I would say that I was pretty naive for a lot of my life about LGBTQ issues. And I remember back in, I don't know, the 2000s or so, when there was the whole debate about civil unions versus marriage, same-sex marriage. And, um, I myself was very tolerant. I thought, well, yeah, people should be able to be allowed to do what they do. And I didn't really see a difference between civil unions and marriage until I think it was California passed something. I'm not sure it was California. Anyway, all of a sudden, people were allowed to be married and they had such joy. And I'm going, wow, if I had known that it meant this much to them, I would have been advocating for same-sex marriage versus civil unions. And then on trans, I never really understood much about trans. And I watched, I don't know if you're familiar with Modus Theater, but they have some I think it's transformative stories or something like that. I went to a performance of that, which was for people who had converted, I don't know what the right term is, but had converted to the other sex, and just how it was so meaningful for them. And so they were so miserable in their old bodies and so happy in their new bodies. And I just realized, I mean, this is where I learn, is where I hear or see or empathize with actual people that are experiencing these things. So that's how I learned, and I would definitely recommend Modus Theater to any of you if you ever get a chance to watch their stories.
Yeah, thank you for sharing about Modus. They are so cool. David Brenya, I was lucky enough to work with, and he was one of the storytellers on that, and he's also on their board. They actually just did one for parents of trans kids, and it was 8 stories. And it was really cool. I was just there for that as well. Yeah, I mean, really good example of, it's not the most important thing in the world to me that people understand how to use the correct words around identities. It's me personally not very important, not the most important thing. It is of course important to affirm people's identities and let them live their lives. But what is most important to me is building that empathy. Right, Peggy, that you're talking about, right? Like witnessing that story and being like, wow, okay, like I understand this is important, and I, as a person who cares about individuals being able to live happy, healthy lives, want to make sure that trans people also get to live happy, healthy lives. Or similarly, the story about civil unions versus marriage, right? And seeing people experience that joy and being like, okay, great, that's what we should be doing then. Like, let people do that. And it doesn't, quite frankly, it is not as important to me that we use all the correct words, and you will definitely interact with people who feel differently than I do about that, and that's okay. But I will say that here, the fact that you all showed up tonight to think through this in this moment when trans people have become the center of a culture war in this country um, is really meaningful and powerful to those of us who are on the ground every day doing this advocacy. So thank you for being here, and thanks for sharing with me and being honest and vulnerable. I'm gonna move us through the end of the presentation. Let's see if I can jump to the next part of this. Oh, sorry, wait 1 second. Okay, so what I would love for everybody to put into the chat is what is one action you'll take in the next month to share your story? So maybe who might you talk to? A neighbor, a coworker, a family member? And what part of your story might help them feel safe to rethink about what they've been told about trans people explicitly. So what is one action you'll take in the next month to share your story? I'd love to see that in the chat. I am somehow on time, which is truly impressive for me. For the members of my team who are here, I'm sure, are like, wow, nailed it. Okay, so love if y'all could put what an action you'll take in the next month to share your story into the chat. And I will just put up this next slide for the next thing One Colorado is doing. We have LGBTQ Lobby Day coming up on Sunday, February 22nd and Monday, February 23rd. I'll make sure that Shauna, Beth, and Kathy have the information to send out to you all afterwards about how to register for Lobby Day. We also have legislative kickoff. Will be on January 27th. I think, Jenna, that's where you and I got to meet last year for the first time after a long time of trying to get in contact with us. So I'm really glad that you were there last year so that I'm here now. It's kind of full circle.
Do you have a location for that, Jax? Is that going to be the Champagne Tiger again?
We're doing it in Denver. We're sharing the location after you register, but it'll be close to Champagne Tiger. We decided to do a bigger venue with a little bit easier ability to hear and be able to see people speak. So,
okay.
But I do love
Okay,
Champagne Tiger.
Okay, and what was the date again?
It's January 27th.
Okay.
I can drop the registration in the chat if so for you to have it now, but I'll also make sure that you all have it to send out in an email afterwards.
We do have one response in the chat. Kathy White says she'll try to respond to others on social media from this framework rather than coming out swinging. Shauna says, I live in a conservative area. I love wearing my LGBTQ plus shirts out. And I'm always open to chat when people comment on them, either positively or negatively. And my response is that I'll tell my story to an estranged friend.
Awesome. Thank you, Kathy. I love all of those options. That's really great. Yeah, Kathy, I'm happy to share the slides with you all on the storytelling framework, but not about the initiatives probably. So we'll share one last thing to close out and then open for questions. The work of justice requires power, and for power to become justice, it requires love, which is Marshall Gans. And I believe that we will win.
We do have one other response.
Yeah.
Beth says she'll speak to her son with patience and empathy, even when he's being narrow-minded and fear-based. And then 4-star Durango telling my story on a radio interview later this month. Audrey, 2 actions. I'm attending a school board meeting on Thursday, and the AAUW JEDI committee is having a program on January 24th on medical perspectives of transgender. So we've got a lot of good actions going on.
Absolutely. This is awesome. Thanks, y'all. I would love to hear that radio interview and hear more about that JEDI committee meeting too. Um,
Jack, I can't thank you enough for taking the time tonight. I know your plate is overflowing right now. Your work is so important. And I know that changing the narrative on trans equality, it starts with each and every one of us. And that's what we've learned tonight. There are such, maybe not easy, but there are ways that we can reach people that we think are unreachable. So I'm just so grateful that you came tonight and shared this with you. And I'm so thankful to all of you who were vulnerable and shared your
Yes.
stories tonight. Just a reminder, this is the first of 3 segments that we're going to be doing on LGBTQ and the JEDI Task Force. We're going to be doing a presentation on gender affirming care, and also we have a panel of parents who are parenting children in the LGBTQ community. So hang around for those in the next few months. I think we did such a great job, Jax, of keeping everybody engaged, and you did so much with the chat that we are in perfect shape. If you want to add anything else, otherwise we can say goodnight.
I see that Kathy has her hand up, and I think Jenna maybe wanted to say anything. So if anybody has any questions, I'm also open to answering them too.
And I'd also just like to make a plug for the League of Women Voters. If you like this presentation and you want to keep more coming similar to this, please consider giving a donation to the League of Women Voters of Colorado. Every little bit helps. So thanks very much.
Jenna, did you want to say anything?
I had actually just forgotten to mute myself after I talked to Jax a little bit, but I really appreciate Shauna and Matthew for putting this together. I had a thought and it just sort of uh, oh, I know what it was. It was the thing I always come back to was we really are in all the we're all in this together. And I know we have Martin Luther King Day coming up, and I've been on the parade several times except when it's been crazy blizzardy cold. But I just remember that quote from Martin Luther King Jr. And I really feel that way too. As we've kind of put this program together, we've been talking a lot about the trans folks, but the scope is bigger, as Jackson. Many folks have been saying it's the entire LGBTQ community, and it's all marginalized people. It's the immigrants, and that's why the JEDI is such a cool group that we're looking kind of across maybe our immediate experiences into those of immigrants and other people who are sort of been not at the table and left out of the conversations.
Well
Yeah.
said. Well said.
Thank you. I always forget to do this, which is funny since I'm political director and I need to always collect data. I'm just dropping a little feedback form in the chat. It's pretty short if you want to submit any feedback. It helps us build on what we're doing, continue to iterate and change, and make it the most useful it possibly can be. So I appreciate you all in completing that, and I'll make sure that Shauna gets it in my little grouping of things to send out to the crew.
Yeah. You and One Colorado are such amazing allies, and I know the league, we're so thankful to partner with you and help in any way we can. So, again, thank you for all you do. And now you can just go and relax a little bit because you've deserved it. So, thanks for sharing your evening with us, everybody. And I will make sure, Jax, I will make sure to get that survey out to everyone who was on the chat tonight, and hopefully you'll get some great responses. But I know it's been a wonderful presentation and very well received.
Thank you, everyone.
Good night, everybody. Thank you.